Flipping it up and out. Bogut! A recent block by Bogut.
Good recovery by Andrew Bogut.
Let's get rogue.
Welcome to Rogue Bogues, the basketball series. A lot to get through today. A lot of exciting and not exciting playoff series, but the second round is going to be immense, in my opinion. Pro, how goes it?
Bogues, I know we got so much to do, so I won't go into like a 9-minute rant about some bullshit. So I'll just let us get right into it. So, I'll let the 9 fans that follow us fucking, have a good listen to that.
Don't want to get berated. All right, we do have a lot to get through. We have obviously all the playoffs have now finalized the first round. A lot going on around the league in general, news-wise, free agency. There's rumbles about players moving, so we'll try to get through as much as we can. But we'll start with the latest game. Sacramento Golden State Warriors series ends up finishing 4-3, so I got one right, thankfully, because the rest don't look too good. But a great series, in my opinion. I think Sacramento, really had a chance to win that series. They really did. But we spoke on the last podcast about, can Golden State get a road win? Because it just seemed like, when it was 2-2, they couldn't get it done, and then they let Game 6 go. Had to go back to Sac, and they get it done twice in one series. Just phenomenal effort by Golden State. And I think, something needs to be said about just no panic by them. They're so battle-tested. They've been in these situations so many times, and you can't practice or prepare for a Game 7 until you've been in numerous Game 7s and know what it's about, know the highs and the lows. And Sacramento looked fried in that second half. They couldn't make a shot. They couldn't get stops. And then obviously Steph Curry did what Steph Curry has done historically at an all-time level. But I thought it was a great series. I think Sacramento showed a lot of heart. They've finally got a organization, a program, whatever you want to call it, that the fans can have some positivity and be proud about going into the future. They're not going into an off season again where they're like, holy shit, where are we at? They actually have a nucleus now and they can build for something in the future, Pro. But how did you see that series, and did you think it would play out this way?
Bogues, I didn't. I think we spoke on it last time where, it just, Golden State really didn't show all year that they could win on the road. There's just something weird and off on their team, about their team most of the year, and really haven't been a dominating team. But like you spoke on it many times about experience, how important that is going into a playoff series against a team that has done really well, but really hasn't done it in a long, sort of long stretches like Sacramento. This is the first year in a long time that they had a really good, high-level competitive team. I think that Golden State showed a lot of poise and, just sort of toughness, and those veterans just sort of know how to get it done. I mean, Steph Curry just sort of proves that, look, it's a lot different. There's a big difference between being someone who puts up numbers in the NBA and a player that can impact winning. And then have a guy that can impact winning and put up huge numbers is really hard to find. And that's why he's one of the game's greatest. And there's a stat with Steve Kerr, Bogues. I don't know if you saw it, and I didn't read that far down the run sheet. So if I fucked you on the stat segment, Steve Kerr is 19-0 against the West since he's coaching. Started coaching 19-0 in the playoff
series.
That's crazy. Yeah. I just saw that number. Now, again, it could have been a fake account, but I doubt it. I think it's a legit number. 19.
Well, it is skewed because the one year they didn't make the playoffs, though, so we're going to count that one. But yeah, I don't remember them losing.
Yeah,
in anything other than a finals, right?
Yeah, it's crazy, right? I mean, yeah, he had that year that he didn't make it, but it's amazing to be able to do that consistently like that. I just didn't see it in the team. They just didn't have it. And you stuck with them. You were harsh when you needed to be when they weren't playing well throughout the season. But in the playoffs, like, to me, it's just hard for me sometimes to read it, especially if I'm not there. Just seeing it like close up. But it's just, just to be able to.
Well, last season changed my mind. Like, I thought they had an up and down season last season, and then they limp into the playoffs, and they've been there before. This is another team like the Clippers or someone like that. I have concerns because I've spoken about, playing together and getting a feel, and having numerous games together is something you need. But they don't need that. They've been together for so long, and that's kind of why I think just in these series. And now it could have went the other way. It could have went 4-3 Sacramento, and we look like idiots. But I just think they have something in a 7-game series where they don't panic. They get punched at home for Game 6. Steve Kerr waves the white flag with 4.5, 5 minutes left, which is unheard of in a Game 6 closeout game. And they were just like, "Yep, cool. We've got Game 7. We're cool. We've got one more." And you could just see it was just stoic. They were just kind of even keel and just thought, "We've got one more game left, and we're confident we can win it." And they come out and blast them in this game. So I thought it was a great performance by them, considering the suspension with Draymond, the distractions. I mean, Wiggins hasn't played for how long? Hadn't he played? A couple of months. Comes in and has a great. He didn't shoot it that well, but just the energy that he brings. He's a decent rebounder for a guard. He's one of their best defenders. Just to slot him back in, like most teams don't have that luxury. A guy out 2 weeks, so they got to baby him back. It's pretty good.
And how about Looney? I mean, come on, man. 21 rebounds. I mean, look, he's a non-scoring big that just knows his role and dominates that role to the simplest degree. And he just really impacts the game because he could play in that system. Like you said, so many big guys, it's so hard to play in that split action system, and he's mastered it. I just remember this kid, he was hurt the first year or two, had that like hip thing or whatever he had.
Double hip surgery. Yeah. It was double hip surgery.
I remember him just doing Mikan drills and just working out 3 hours before game time when we go to Golden State and just watching him. And to go from that and sticking with the process of getting better and developing, it was a special thing to see. And, Golden State, like the lower seed team, I don't have the numbers in front of me because I'm a moron, but the lower seed team in Game 7s on the road in playoffs, it's a very low number of wins. And, and like going back to your point about just team, like sometimes when teams get punched in the mouth, especially if you're a veteran team and not wavering and just sort of playing through it. And because you've been through those wars, I was around that Laker team with Kobe, and they would go down 15 in a game or a playoff game at home. And you just wait for it. And they they didn't panic, and they played through it. And I remember them going down 3-2, going back to LA in the 2010 finals and talking to Kobe about it. It was like, look, man, I mean, we've been through here before. So most of our guys are vets that we played together so long. It's not like we're this team that just got assembled this year. When you're a team that just has the core, of your group intact for year in and year out, you know each other, you played with each other, you've been through so many different types of games, great games, awful games, games where you can't miss, games where you can't make, and just sort of how to grind out these games, especially when you had success. So it was great to see. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, really good series. Steph finishes with averaging 33.7 points, 5 rebounds and 5 assists. De'Aaron Fox was the best scorer for the Sacramento Kings. A poor Game 7, but 27, 5 and 8 assists. So De'Aaron Fox has had a great jump this year, as we've all said. Deserves all accolades he gets. But we're going to go through, so Golden State move on. We'll get to them a little bit later again in the next series. We're going to go panic or patience, bro. That's going to be our cash cry for these teams that have been eliminated. If you're the Sacramento Kings, are you in a panic or are you patient?
Oh, hell no.
Going through off season, of course.
Yeah, you're fine, Bogues. Like, look, and I'm sure we're going to get to the Giannis thing about the failure comment. Look, this is a team that, they were the higher seed. They were expected to win. You haven't really been through anything yet as a team, and this is your first sort of go-around. And they played so well throughout the year and gave so much energy. And they've got De'Aaron Fox, they've got Sabonis, Keegan Murray, Harrison, Herder, Monk, so many of their sort of core that, look, you could just run it back and you'll be fine. I think they have a lot of good history. They've got a good future together. They got no reason to panic. I think you just sort of hey, take your lumps and learn from it. And I think there is a difference, and we'll get into it, about a series that you expect a team to win and them, getting blown out or losing in bad fashion. You'd say, well, that was a failure versus this was a learning experience. I think that all those guys, besides Harrison, there's really isn't a player on that team that had deep playoff experience. And I think that I don't care how good of a player you are, if you haven't really been through it and through those battles, and I want you to talk about it, obviously, because you've been through it so many times, But like your first time, I don't care how much success you had leading into that. If you don't have that playoff success, it's really hard to sort of grab it by the horns and just go at it and just sort of slice through it like a hot knife through butter. Like you're gonna need you need to get punched in the face, know what it feels like, prepare for it again, and then get back to it. But I think Sacramento should. They're fine. Keegan Murray is a hell of a player going forward. I mean, I'd be excited as hell to have him on my roster. And they've got just so many nice little pieces. And yeah, I expect good things, really good things from this team going forward.
Yeah, and I agree. They're in a position where they don't need to panic. They have a good young core. Murray's going to get better. They've got some good veterans. I wonder what their cap situation is, Pro. Do you know where they're at with the cap?
So for this, coming off the cap, let's just put it that way. Harrison comes off at 8, I believe, unless I messed this up. His $18 million comes off. That's sort of it for big contracts that are coming off the books. And they don't really have anything that's really adding to their cap going forward, like, guys that are extended and going, really big. So right now, give or take, they're right around, they're probably going to be north of 100 million, so I think they're probably going to be sort of close to the cap. So I think they'll be in decent shape, with all their exceptions and things like that. I don't think they don't really have a ton of money to spend, but they'll have enough to sort of, try to sign somebody. I'm sure they'll probably try to sign Harrison back, probably for a lower number or sort of a number where he's making. So, I'm not sure. I have no idea about that, but, they're in decent shape cap wise.
Yeah, they're 24th this year. Cap spend 136, and they drop to 105 next year. So they do have a little bit of cap space, Pro, but a lot of that will have to be spent on their current talent and current contract situations. But yes, all good with Sacramento for me. I think they're in a good spot. All right, Minnesota and Denver series, pretty predictable this one. I think most people predicted that Denver would get this either in a sweep or something close to. That is exactly what transpired. Jokic was phenomenal in this series again. Had a few bad shooting nights, but for the most part, he just does so much. He's 26, 12, and 9 for the series, which is just bonkers to say out loud. Anthony Edwards is there shining light with 31, 5, and 5 for the series. The overall score in the series, when you total the 5 games, was 115 to 105 over the course of a series. They were 9-point winners on average per game. So they dominated this from start to finish. We'll talk about Denver moving on. I don't think we have anything really to talk about Denver because they should have got through that quite easily. They handled business. There were a few little lulls there defensively, which we spoke about last week, where they have these 2, 3 minute, 4 minute lulls where they don't guard. Michael Malone called them out for it. But Minnesota, I mean, they made that Rudy Gobert deal. Everyone, even that didn't know basketball, was like, how's that going to work with Cat? Well, it doesn't really work. It's not cohesive. We saw the Gobert, Kyle Anderson fight. I would be, really surprised if Gobert's there next season. Now, you might say that, what do they do with him? Who's going to take him? But, I mean, it just does not seem like it's fitting. And if you've got Edwards now in that camp that he's not too fond of Rudy, which I'm not sure, but Kyle Anderson's comments were pointing towards that, they need to get him out of here. No one's kind of happy with him. That was leaked. But, I mean, with Mini Pro, are you panic or patient? So I'm panic. I have to say I'm panic at this point. This roster's ceiling in a good year, all healthy, everyone playing well, hugs and kisses, is what a phenomenal year. Is a 5, maybe a 6 or 7 seed in the West if they have a phenomenal year. That's I just don't think that's good enough, and they're going to have to move away from a few pieces on that roster, Pro.
So, Bogues, the biggest problem right now is what do you do with? I don't think it's a Rudy problem. I think short term, definitely for sure, but I wouldn't panic on that yet. I think they really need to go through another year with him. What are you going to do with Karl Anthony Towns? Would be the biggest problem. I think it's a knee. He's dealing with he's only played 35% of his games this year, which probably makes him an Iron Man in the NBA compared to how many games people sit these days. But, the problem is they don't fit well together. Towns' game doesn't really fit, in my opinion, like, I think that Rudy's got a better chance of fitting with his game than Towns does with his. And they owe Towns about $200 million going forward. So it's like, if I were them, look, I'm not overly happy about what Gobert did this year for sure, but you sort of have that problem with Towns when he takes up so much of your cap. You can't really play those guys together. It's not really going to work. You don't know going forward what Towns' injury situation is going to be with that knee, and that's the biggest issue. Look, you got Naz Reid coming off the bench for a fraction of the money than Towns is. Obviously not close as far as a player, but you spending so much on Towns, and I just don't know his value out there as far as for trade, A, for his game, and B, like, defensively as well as that knee. Like, what are you going to do with him? So that's going to be a big problem going forward. Like, to me, look, you've got your franchise. You've got Edwards right there. And, Gobert, for whatever anyone wants to say about him, is still a very good high-level defensive player. Their benches, they're just okay. Kyle Anderson, Naz Reid, Taurean Prince has played well. McLaughlin, Austin Rivers, probably interchangeable. Nothing really else on that bench. Jalen Noel has played okay. Jaden McDaniel's a good defender. They got to do something. And the problem is, what you going to get? What are you going to get with Karl Anthony Towns? To trade him, you're probably going to have to trade out some picks for someone to take that contract with that knee. But the problem is, you gave most of your picks to Danny Ainge in the Gobert trade. So I'm definitely, look, they're cap screwed. They can't really pick up many players. They're not drafting, obviously, because of where they finished throughout the year. Plus with their pick situation going to Utah, I'm definitely panicking because they're sort of like the Chicago Bulls in a way, except Edwards is better than anybody the Chicago Bulls has. But besides, and at least you could build around that. The problem is they got dysfunction with Gobert, Towns' contract. They don't really have much of a bench outside of, Reed, Prince, and Anderson being okay. I just don't know where they go. What do you see in Bogues going forward for them?
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. It's Edwards is that guy. I think you got to build around him. I'd almost build more around him than I would Towns. Towns has floated to shooting that three too much for my liking. I don't know if that's him or the team or the philosophy. I know you need to shoot threes, but there was opportunities where he could have really dominated. Especially Gordon guarding him. At the 4 spot, I think he's much bigger than him and has a nice touch. So. Yeah, they're going to do something, but what can you do? They're hamstrung. I mean, Gobert's on a massive deal, right? Like his salary's what's he got there? Let me just bring this up real quick.
He's at 41, he's 41, 43, 46 in the next 3.
And that 46, I assume, that's in blue, is a player option, I assume. Let me see. Yeah, it is a player option. I'll tell you now, he's going to be opting into that one at that point in his career. So they're locked into him. Who takes him on that kind of money? I know we make the joke of you could trade a max contract on a vacuum cleaner these days, but that's kind of slowed a little bit the last couple of seasons, Pro. It hasn't been as crazy as it once was. So Towns is contracted through past Rudy for 33, 36, 50, 54, and 58. They're going to obviously have Edwards coming up soon, but they have some pieces. I mean, Conley was an okay pickup, but yeah, I just don't think this roster currently constructed it's a bit of a panic for me. So I think they'll be trying to make some splashes, and it is a new ownership group too, so look towards that. All right, next one, Phoenix Clippers 4-1. This was a disappointing series just from the injury bug. I mean, I honestly thought if Kawhi was healthy that they had a chance to win this series. I really do. I probably going 7, coin flip, but I think they have a chance to win the series. As soon as he goes down, and I give credit to the Clippers, man, like they could have packed it up and not competed to an extent. Like, we don't have Paul George. We don't have Kawhi Leonard. We've got every excuse under the sun to just lay an egg and blah, blah, blah. And they didn't. Russell Westbrook revamped his career in this series alone, in my opinion. I thought he was very good, brought energy. Even in his bad shooting nights, he did other things. His defense was actually very good this series. It was locked in. But it was a pretty close series considering those injuries. The Clippers just hung around. They hung around in games. Even the last game, they lose 136 to 130. They hung around. So the question for me, Pro, panic or patience, I think the Clippers, you have to side towards panic. If you look at this roster, it's it's patience, they're fine, but knowing what we know about the injury situation, knowing what we know about the pieces they've brought in to complement those guys, well, those guys aren't out on the court long enough. And injuries suck, don't get me wrong, I've been part of it, and it's sometimes there's nothing you can do. It's just bad luck, but they've rolled the dice on these guys, and I'm interested to hear what you think their move should be, because I'm not in full panic. I'm not in patience mode. I'm kind of probably in the middle where the right deal comes along, I'm considering it and probably need to move on, but they're not, they're not a Minnesota where they just need to make mass changes. I think there's some tweaks they need to make to their roster. But this is the thing. If they're healthy, if they're completely healthy going into the playoffs, they're one of the favorites again next season, Pro. And that's the conundrum with the Clippers.
Look, it's frustrating for sure, seeing what the Clippers did to get these guys there, and then their production level for not only early playoff exits but injuries. Look, there's nothing you could do with injuries sometimes, Bogues, right? Like, I know we want to talk about sitting guys versus not sitting. We should do this, we should do that. It doesn't matter what you do. You're only going to be judged on how those guys are going to be as far as their health in the playoffs. With the Clippers itself, I'm not doing anything. I'm keeping my core together. There's been talk about Paul George for Trae Young. I'm sure that they're going to sort of make some calls on Kyrie, to see what the deal is as far as what their roster sort of can get them in trades. But look, I don't think anybody's giving you anything for Kawhi Leonard. I think that everyone's afraid of that knee for good reason, right? I mean, for good reason. And with Paul George, I think you can get something for Paul George. The problem is you're going to get 60 cents, 70 cents on the dollar in trade value back, or you're going to have to bring back a disgruntled player. Why do you have to go through that? Whatever they're doing, it's not working yet as far as like hitting on all cylinders and going through the playoffs. But when those guys are healthy and playing together, they're I don't want to say unstoppable, but they're very good. In the limited time they've been together, when they played, you're like, oh, wow. I mean, not only do you have those two guys, but if you re-sign Westbrook, which I don't know how they're going to be able to do that money-wise, but, because they don't have his bird rights. And I think that, money-wise, like they can only offer him, the taxpayer mid-level. It's not going to be much. But you got Norman Powell. That was a very good, addition a couple years, last year for them. Mason Plumlee, you're probably going to lose to free agency, but you have this core together. I don't think Marcus Morris is going to be back. They'll probably throw him in some type of trade, but you've got this core. It works for you when you keep them healthy. So you got to figure out with your medical team, can these guys be healthy? Because if you deal them, again, you're not getting much for these guys. Paul George, you'll get something for. You could probably get Trae Young. You could probably get that done. You could probably get Kyrie. You could probably get you could probably get some type of another disgruntled superstar. Or I don't think you're going to get a really high-level young player. You'll get a good player, but I just think at the age that Paul is at, not that he's over the hill, but like you're just not getting that. I don't think you're going to get that laundry list of, and I don't think the Clippers want the draft picks and all this stuff. I think they're ready to win now. They've got one of the better coaches in the league. I think you keep these guys together. Maybe you make a couple of changes on your bench and things like that. Look, Terrence Mann and Eric Gordon were very effective. I don't know what Eric Gordon is going to do, but if I'm Eric Gordon, I'm staying there. It's not dysfunctional like Houston. It's functional. They have a chance to win. And I think that like going forward, they should keep these guys together. I'm panicking to the fact that you gave up so much to get Paul George and Kawhi Leonard, and you're just not getting what you expect. What you expected, obviously. And very seldomly do these deals work anyway when you get all these players together and you try to win games. Miami, it didn't work right away, but it finally worked. Obviously it worked in Boston in 2008. But a lot of times when you have this collection of talent, something goes wrong. Look, Brooklyn did it twice. They did it with the Deron Williams, Kevin Garnett, Paul Pierce team, about 10 years ago. Then you get, Brooklyn again when they put all these players together. Houston had multiple collectives of talent where they just couldn't get it done. So, it's funny when people put all this talent together, everyone in the media and basketball say, oh, they're going to win 3 championships, 4 championships. It's really hard. I don't care what type of talent you have assembled. It's really hard for everything to work in your favor. It might look good in the short term, but you got to play those 82 games and you got to play playoff series. And there's a lot of ups and downs that go into it. So, yeah, if I'm the Clippers, I'm staying with what I have, and making one more run at it. I am not making any major trades with that team. What do you think, Bogues?
Yeah, I think it's just such a tough one. It's like, how many more years can you milk this for? Like I said, I'm in the middle. I think if a trade comes up for Kawhi or PG, that's a good one for even the immediate future. Like, two second-tier stars for Kawhi and a throw-in. Maybe I'll look at it. But yeah, it's just so hard. You just want to see this team healthy, and I really believe if Kawhi was healthy, just Kawhi without PG, they would have a chance in this series. But we must credit the Phoenix Suns as well. They played a decent series. I still think they're very ISO heavy at times, and I think defensively they have massive lapses. But they got this one done. Devin Booker led the series with 37 a night, if you don't mind. 5 rebounds, 6 assists. Russell Westbrook was the best Clipper with 23, 7 and 7. So the Suns move on, and yeah, we'll see what happens with the Clippers. All right, moving on to the next one. We are off to the Lakers and Memphis, 4-2 for the Lakers. A lot of people had this as an upset series. I thought Memphis could at least squeak it out to 7, but I was heavily wrong about that. The lack of size for Memphis, I think, hurt them. No Clark, no Adams. I mean, Anthony Davis, when he wants to play, he's still, one of the elite players in the NBA, but the consistency has been an issue for him. But yeah, we spoke about last week in the pod, the Brooks comments. I don't think that helped. Kind of woke the Lakers up a little bit. They generally are in cruise control a lot, even during the regular season and some playoff series and even the plains at times. And that woke them up and gave them some fire, and they came out and absolutely dominated Memphis for the most part. It wasn't even looking like it was going to be a series for the most part. I just thought they'd have a bit more grit in them, but this was the exact Grizzlies I thought they were at the start of the season. I thought they'd get to maybe the second round and bomb out. I didn't have them as championship favorites or championship run. The John Moran comments around he's not worried about anyone in the West. You hope that takes that with a grain of salt now and rewires the way he's going about things both on and off the court. And he even mentioned that, in fairness, towards the end of the season in one of his exit interviews, that he's got a lot of work to do on and off the court, and I respect that, that he's actually addressing the concerns. Ja was their best player in this series of 25, 7 and 7. LeBron 22, 11 and 5 for the Lakers, but a pretty cruisy series for the Lakers, in my opinion. They blow them out in game 1. They lose game 2. They win by double digits in game 3. Game 4 goes to overtime. They definitely could have stole that one. And then the series was over in both double-digit games game 5, Memphis get it by double digits, and then the Lakers absolutely smack them in game 6. But wasn't an exciting series by any means for me to watch. Didn't enjoy this one. This was up there with the Minnesota and Denver one. It was just a formality once it got rolling, even though I thought Memphis would have a bit more fight. But give me your thoughts about the series before we go into panic or patience for the Grizzlies.
I thought it was, like you said, it was a lackluster series. Memphis just didn't get it enough done. I do agree with you, Bogues. I think their size really hurt them. Not having Adams, not having Clark. I think it really hurt them for sure. Look, we talk about all the talk, and look, it's just noise, right? Like all the the shit talking from Memphis or any team that does it. Look, you either get it done or you don't, and you didn't get it done. It's embarrassing. You should be able to beat the Lakers. Even without the size, you should have enough talent to get it done. And look, in this league, I feel as though that you either get it done or you don't, individually as well as a team. And for Brooks and Bain, they got to look themselves in the mirror and say, what can I do better? What can I do more of this? I got to be able to get things done. Brooks needs to figure out what he's doing offensively, because he's a non-offensive threat at most times. And look, he could guard. He's not bad, but it's problematic at times. And hey, look, hats off to the Lakers. They played well. They just hang in there. It's like, trying to hit on the girl and just wait there at the bar until the end of the night. That's what I feel as though they've been doing the last couple of months. they just sort of like they just hang around. And if you hang around and you got LeBron and you got Anthony Davis, and then you get some other guys playing well like a D'Angelo Russell or an Austin Reeves. I love watching Jared Vanderbilt play. He's probably my favorite player to watch on their team just because he plays hard and he just sort of bounces around. And he's got pretty high basketball IQ, but, you poke a bear with LeBron and he just comes to play and, like he does every night. And Anthony Davis stays healthy enough where he could play the whole series. Like they're problematic. And yeah, I mean, hats off to the Lakers. It's really hard. Look, I didn't even have them in the top 10 in the early of the year for good reason. I don't know how to judge this team going forward. Do they beat Golden State? Do they not? I'm probably going to say not, but I guess you just can't count them out, right? I mean, if those two guys are at full strength and they're healthy with James and Davis, I mean, they could stay in a lot of games, especially with the additions they've made, with at the trade deadline. It's an interesting group for sure. It was a weird series, that I thought Memphis was going to win, and Lakers came up on top. It's just another day in the shit show NBA, right?
Sure is. But yeah, it just wasn't a great series. I think the Lakers did what they had to get through it. Memphis, are you panic or patience with what they've currently got and what their roster, where they're at?
Well, Bogues, like it's sort of a two-tier deal, right? Like as far as, look, they've got Ja Morant and Jackson, right? And they get those guys long-term. And any championship type team that even can compete for a championship, and I'm not saying they're at the level yet, but like you need at least two juggernauts in your team, or at least guys that are close to it. And then you sort of can rearrange other pieces going forward. They do have those two guys. They're young with Jackson and Morant. And then they just got to, they might have to move some pieces around. Bain, Brooks, Adams, deal those guys and make moves. I'm not panicking, but I think there's definitely got to be, like, to me, an upgrade in their bench. I think they're okay on their bench, but I think they need a little bit more firepower. I think they need more shooting. I think they just don't have enough. Look, you got, like, who's their big time shooter? Bain can shoot it a little bit, but like, Bain's
shooting Brooks
at 32% from three, though.
Well, yeah, he was talking like he would shoot it. So I just thought he'd be the shooter.
He shot his fucking mouth. He was fucking around. He found out about it. You talk to him. He's like, he's Steph Curry. Steph Curry, LeBron James, and Kawhi Leonard all in one. But I think they're a long way away from being a really legitimate contender. But they do have those two guys. And and I think those other guys have a little bit of value. Bain's not perfect, but he fits that team. He can make shots, short-armed, not really a big-time scorer, but like scores 20 a game, plays off those guys pretty well. Adams just got to figure his, injury stuff and just sort of keep him healthy. And then you got to figure out what you're going to do with Brooks. I'm not panicking, but that roster has a lot of holes in it. I like Tyus Jones, but like, when you're coming at me with a second unit of Conchar, Kennard, Aldama, Brandon Clark, you got to be able to do better. So I think that's where you got to figure on some things as far as making moves to sort of get better. I don't know if you deal some of those secondary guys like a Bain or a Brooks or Adams, or I love Adams, so I wouldn't, but like you got to figure out what you're going to do. And look, like they've got plenty of time. They got those guys signed, but you know how this stuff, the landscape of the league changes. And, I don't know what you do exactly, but at least they got their pieces, going forward. It's not like they're five moves away, but they got to be able to solidify, I think, a legitimate third player on that roster. They've got inconsistency with Brooks and Bain. I just think they need that third guy, in my opinion.
Yeah, they do. It's a matter of who they get. I think the young core is good. I'm not in full panic with them, but I just feel like the Memphis grit and grind from a couple of seasons ago, they need to get back to that. Just shut the fuck up. Stop with all the shenanigans and stop disrespecting teams that you haven't even got past. keep your feet on the ground. And I think humbly they can go further that way rather than trying to be rock stars when you're not rock stars. Like Clay's comments ring true, and I'll keep bringing them up. Like you guys are acting like you're a dynasty and you haven't won a championship. They said they were a dynasty, right? And it's just like, come on, like regular season and playoff basketball is different. And that's why I had my concerns in a 7-game series with Memphis from day one. I was just like, I just don't think they're cut out for once the going gets tough with these guys, something's going to happen. And unfortunately, yes, they had the injuries. Most of their stars were there. They did miss that big in Clark or Adams. I get it, but I don't think that's going to change a whole lot as far as their mental makeup. And I have concerns there. So I think they need to make some tweaks. I think Morant, Jackson Jr. a stay, and Bain are other guys you build around. I think everyone else on that roster, in my opinion, is expandable.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I agree with that. I think, there's a lot of expendable people on that roster. They just got to make those little tweaks that's just sort of going to get them going. And look, the grit and grind stuff, they're in that whoop that trick deal now. That grit and grind left a long time ago. They've never been that type. It's this new group. This new group's sort of different than the Zach Randolph and the Marc Gasol and the Tony Allen and the Mike Conley. They're a different makeup. Those guys guarded, they were physical, they were tough. This team's sort of a different makeup. I'm not saying it's necessarily bad, but it's just they're just a different makeup. And they got to figure it out. And look, again, different. Was it a failure to lose to LA? I mean, look, I know we're mentioning failure on every series now because it's such a hot topic, but yeah, it's definitely, you had the injury stuff you could talk about, but I'll tell you what, this is more of a learning experience for them because now they got to learn how to step the fuck up. Because that was 2 years ago where they made that was what a season or two ago. When was it, Bogues? 2 seasons ago when they made that big run. Not even a big run, but like a run. Yeah. So I mean,
for them, yeah.
It's like being an Asian prom queen. Like no one knows in the United States who was a prom queen in their high school 8 years ago. Like they forget about that shit real quick.
And they're still the number 2 seed though, bro. This is my point. I know the Lakers were a sneaky 7.
Yeah,
but you're still the number 2 seed. I circle back to the Warriors run. We faced Portland, and Steph got hurt in the series before. We had 4 games without Steph Curry, and we still were businessmen like, hey, it doesn't matter. We need to keep this thing going, keep it rolling, and we won those games. We kept them at bay, and that's. You can't. Are you telling me, Clark and Adams are going to make that much of a difference? Yeah, maybe a little bit with Anthony Davis, like I said, but they still had their main dogs out there for most of the series, and it's no excuse to go down 4-2. It should at least went 7. And I think they need to make some tweaks. Those 3 guys are the only 3 that I would keep. I think Morant's the absolute no trade. Jackson Jr. is next in line. He's kind of close to a no trade because he's got a bigger ceiling. Bain you could move with the right deal, but those are the 3 I'd keep. Everyone else on the table for me on that roster. So we'll see where that goes. All right, Miami, Milwaukee, what a series, pro. This was, this is a beautiful case study on what momentum does in the NBA playoffs. Now, Miami scraped into the playoffs, lost in the first round of the play-in. They win the second game. They go straight to Milwaukee 2 days later, play well. They get the big win, game 1. Giannis gets hurt. He misses a few games, comes back. And momentum's gone. Miami snatch it, and they snatch it 4-1. And, I mean, it's just an unbelievable series. When you factor in what Jimmy Butler did, no one, I mean, I'm sure there's someone out there that's posting, I picked the Miami Heat. It's like you've just picked that to screenshot in the rare chance that it happens, in my opinion. But for them to come out and put on that display was just sensational to watch. I think they were just the grit and the grind of the way they won that series, and to do it 4-1. Milwaukee, during the regular season, Milwaukee had stints without Giannis and still played very good basketball. They were still a very solid team, and they just couldn't get it done. They could not get it done. Jimmy Butler, 37, 6-5 for the series. Big shots late in the quarter. I heard, did you hear Spo, what he said about drawing up a play at the end of one of their games? Did you hear that comment?
Mm-mm.
So apparently Spo said that he was drawing up a play at the end of, I can't remember what game it was. It might have been their last game. And it wasn't for Jimmy. And Jimmy looked him dead in the eyes and was like, I'm getting the fucking ball. Draw that shit up for me. And did, and you can love or you can hate Jimmy and the way he goes about it, but he just goes up. Him and Kawhi, to me, they just go up a whole notch in the playoffs. Those 2 guys specifically. Obviously Kawhi was hurt, so we couldn't see it too much, but Jimmy, they just go up a whole nother level, and he just refused to lose. So it was a very impressive outing. Milwaukee, very disappointing finish to the season after the regular season that they had. They had a very good regular season again and just couldn't get it done. But something to be said also, Hero out of the lineup. All of a sudden, you're like, man, we don't have enough scoring now. What are we going to do? And then you put in essentially two role-playing guards that were splitting minutes in Gabe Vincent and Caleb Martin. And they were phenomenal, pro. They were really good. Kyle Lowry as well was in there, but Gabe Vincent's played 42 minutes, hit that big three to keep them in contention late. But just those two guys guard. They pick up full court. They're dogs defensively. They've got a bit more out of Gabe than they expected offensively, but it goes to show you that they've lost offense in Hero, but they brought in two guys that are now getting minutes that are just happy to play a role and do whatever it takes. And it was just an unbelievable pro mantra of staying ready, because you never know when your number's going to be called. And Caleb Martin just earned himself a lot of money in the future, with that performance as a very good role playing guard in the NBA. So as much as it was a 4-1 series, it was an exciting one to watch for me, because I just felt like Milwaukee were going to make it a series. You just felt like, get game 5, that then swings the pressure back on Milwaukee to go. Sorry, going back to Miami, and it just didn't happen. It just did not happen. And just an awesome series, even though it was 4-1 for me, pro.
Yeah, Bogues. I mean, these guys are winning playoff series with Martin, Gabe Vincent, Strus, and then Duncan Robinson, who was like toe tagged, dead to rights, radioactive to touch, for the last year, since last year's playoffs. And he's stepping up and playing minutes. And it just goes to show you that you got to stay ready. And this league is all about having confidence in playing your role and just next man up mentality. You could give Miami all the shit you want about, like, they always mention culture, but they really have it. These guys are a close-knit group. They're extremely tough. They're held accountable, and they don't care. They'll just come and play it. And, from Milwaukee, it was just a complete, utter breakdown. It was a complete, utter breakdown. You're a 1 seed. I don't really care you're a 1 seed. You're not a team that's like trying to find their way and sort of had a lot of success for the first year. You won a championship. Your roster's probably arguably better than it was, when you won the championship. You got to be able to take care of business. And look, it's not the only reason, but we talked about this, 6 weeks ago. I remember making the comment about, look, it's going to cost him a playoff game or a playoff series with this free throw shooting with Giannis. And the guy misses 10 free throws and the game goes overtime. It's not like he missed 3 and they lost by 2, where that's just impossible to expect him to make every one. He missed 10 and it goes overtime, and then he misses 3 in the overtime. That's a big time fucking thing. And I just said, look, it's not about being right, but I'm just saying how important free throw shooting is. It's the most valuable shot in the game, statistically, and you got to be able to do it. And, look, hats off to Miami Heat, but, look, they got to step up and Milwaukee. And that to me, that is definition of a failure to me, of a season. And we could dance around it all we want and say, oh, no, Giannis, great job sticking up to the media. And I get it. You can look at that in different ways. Like, yeah, it is a learning experience. We're going through and stuff. Our coach was going through some personal things. We could learn from this. No question you could learn from it. But you're a team, if you're losing in the second round, third round, that happens. You got to be able to take care of business in the first round as a number 1 seed with all your players. Short-handed
Miami. Let's just play that clip real quick. I'm going to put that clip in right now.
Sure.
That Pro is referring to around Giannis. So here that is.
I just asked Bud the exact same question, but I'm curious for you. Do you view this season as a failure?
Oh my God. Okay, because I'm not that up. You asked me the same question last year, Eric. Okay, do you get a promotion every year on your job? No, right? So every year you work is a failure. Yes or no? No. Every year you work towards something, towards a goal. right? Which is to get a promotion, to be able to take care of your family, to be able, I don't know, provide a house for them or take care of your parents. You work towards a goal. It's not a failure. It's steps to success, And if you've never, I don't want to make it personal. So there's always steps to it, Michael Jordan played 15 years, won 6 championships. The other 9 years was a failure. That's what you're telling me. No, I'm asking you a question. Yes or no? Okay, exactly. So why you asking me that question? It's a wrong question. There's no failure in sports. There's good days, bad days. Some days you are able to be successful. Some days you're not. Some days it's your turn. Some days it's not your turn. And that's what sports is about. You don't always win. Some other people's gonna win. And this year somebody else is gonna win. Simple as that. We're gonna come back next year, try to be better, try to build good habits, try to play better, not have a 10-day stretch with playing bad basketball, and hopefully we can win a championship. So 50 years from 1971 to 2021 that we didn't win a championship, it was 50 years of failures? No, it was not. It was steps to it, and we were able to win one. Hopefully we can win another one. Sorry that I didn't want to make it personal because you asked me the same question last year, and last year I was in the right mind space to answer the question back, but I remember it.
All right, so that was a clip, Pro. We've all heard it online. Just want to show it or put it out there so everyone can hear it. But I liked what he said. I'm not going to lie. I think I like his attitude when it comes to this kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And I know it's probably, I don't know if it's anti-winning, but I like his attitude where he's saying there's positives in failure. There's always positives you can take out of it.
No doubt.
And there's learning curves. So I appreciated the message. Yes, in my opinion, I think it was a horrendous finish for the Milwaukee Bucks. But, maybe his point is we found maybe some younger guys that can now step up. Maybe we move on from the positive is we move on from this aging rock. We've got a few older guys that want to move on from. We need X, Y, Z. Does Bud move on? Does he stay? Even though that's a negative, maybe that's a net positive long term. So I understand what he's saying, and I like the message. I think, State and Jordan, other years he didn't win it, were they a failure, all that kind of stuff. But, yeah, I'm on the fence as far as it was the Milwaukee Bucks, number 1 seed versus an 8 that was severely shorthanded. So that's not a successful year for the number 1 seed, but I also agree to an extent that, that there are some positives you can take out of it. And I thought it was a pretty, somewhat snarky for Giannis, which you don't see, but it was pretty kind of, well thought out, and he's obviously thought about it and was frustrated about it. But that's interesting. But moving on, you mentioned Bud, and his brother had passed away in a car accident during the series. May he rest in peace. So that obviously sucked. But when you look at the series, there wasn't a whole lot of adjustments. I think that was the frustrating point. Giannis was asked, would you have liked to have guarded Jimmy? And he said yes. My question, Pro, does Bud survive? Now, for context, head coach Milwaukee Bucks was close to being fired a few seasons ago during that finals run that season. New ownership, all that kind of stuff. There were rumors that if they didn't make that run, he was gone. They made a run and won the ring. So by default, he had to get a bit of an extension, which he did get. Now they've had an epic failure. Do the Bucks move on from him, Pro?
Oh, so now it's an epic failure, Bogues? What is it? Is it not a failure? Is it only a failure for Bud?
I'm talking. I get it, but I'm saying this is more from. I'm talking management, right? And we've seen this story before, Pro. Yeah. There's owners that come in the league that have a coach that's not their guy, but he wins. He happens to win. He happens to get further than he's supposed to, and they're like, shit, we can't fire him now. All right, give him an extension. But now they've got what I'm saying is, by their terms, the ownership, I'm sure, would think this is not a successful season. Does he, whether you think it's fair or not, Pro, I know you don't think it's fair and I know you rate Bud, but do you think, knowing the experiences you've had with ownership and GMs, that he's going to be the scapegoat for this bad season and that they finally just say, you know what, we're going to move on from you because we wanted to a couple of seasons ago anyway?
I think they're going to heavily look at it. I think I'll tell you what, you could agree with it or you could disagree, but I think it's in very poor taste to fire a guy after his brother passed. Now, if we're not talking about that happening, because he looked miserable throughout the playoffs. I mean, I know he passed away sort of pretty close to, I think, to that last game, but he hasn't looked well. Like, he hasn't looked well. Like, maybe this just sort of, maybe just the stress of being a head coach of the NBA sort of taken a negative toll to him. But I don't know, Bogues. I think they will heavily look at it. I just think it's really hard to fire a coach when his brother passed away. There is something we have to talk about with that, because it is there. And, I don't know. I just think it's really tough to do that. The guy has had good success there. They underachieved, obviously, to failure levels, not winning this series. And I think you have to take it at that. I think that you should just run it back to what you have. Look, you've got everybody in place. It's not perfect. I think Middleton is sort of losing his luster. The injuries is sort of getting back. It sort of really bothered him throughout the year, although he played at a good level, when Giannis was out. It sort of did some things. Lopez had a productive season. Drew Holiday plays at a high level. They got good play out of Grayson Allen. I don't know what move you make, Bogues. Like, I know Windhorst was talking about, there's some talk about Giannis leaving, or being unhappy because of the losing and things. I don't know. I don't know any of that. I do think that they will look heavily at if his brother did not pass away. I think there'd probably be more chance than not that he wouldn't be back. I think that if you have any decency as an organization, look, it's not like the guy's a terrible coach. The guy's a very good coach. Yes, he was on the Rocks a few years before they won it. I get that. But the guy is a very good coach, a very well-respected coach. They were the number one seed. I mean, they did play well, and they did bounce out. Last year, they had injuries with Chris Middleton. You could definitely, pinpoint that, where they needed another guy to score, and they just didn't have it, at a high level like Chris can do it. I don't think you fire him. I think he stays. And I just think that you just got to continue to try to retool. They need more shooting off the bench, in my opinion. I thought Joe was good at the end of the year for sure for them. Connaughton was up and down. Javon Carter, they got some good play out of. Portis really played well when he needed to, but
I thought their bench was pretty good.
Shooting the ball,
a bit more shooting, yes. But I mean, shit, dude. Holiday shot it decent through stretches. They got Middleton in the starting lineup. They got Brook Lopez next to him at the 5. Crowder was the interesting one, bro. That was the elephant in the room. They brought him in and didn't play him.
Yeah.
That was a head scratcher. I thought he could have been useful for him, but yeah, I mean, I think your point around is as harsh as this sounds. His brother passing, I think that's an emotional decision more than it is a business decision, and I think NBA teams will make the business decision. I don't think they will factor in those circumstances. As harsh as that may sound, or harsh as it may be, we've seen players get traded with pregnant wives at 8 months about to burst. We've seen players get traded after the death of a family member. I don't think this is going to be any different. I think if they're on a mindset that they want to move on, I think the circumstances off the court won't change that, in my opinion. And some people argue that's right, that's wrong, but I think that's a separate emotional part of what's going on. The mainstay is going to be whether they reflect the performance heavily down to Bud. But like you said, Giannis has a lot to be in this conversation for with the missed free throws. So by his standards, he'll tell you that he didn't have a great series neither, right? But
going for that last game, Bogues, like what they supposed to call a timeout and they didn't. Here's the thing about, and I've talked about this before. They got 97 fucking assistant coaches holding together. Not one of those motherfuckers. I would turn and say, you motherfuckers are fired. I got 27 guys trying to be a coach. All you fucking guys want to do is be coaches. All right, we spend in the gross national product of probably half the countries in the world on fucking assistant coaches. And not one of you fucking guys, that want jobs, not one of you could tell me to call a fucking timeout. Not one of you guys could fucking do that. I fucking can't stand that, Bogues. These fucking 900 assistants to hire. And now, they all like wearing Jerry West in their fucking socks and a fucking a polo shirt that says coach on it. but they don't want to fucking one time have the
Trying to
balls.
translate this for the listeners between the F-bombs. Pros getting loose.
Yeah, I fucking can't stand that shit, Bogues. Because, with all those fucking fleet of assistant coaches, not one fucking guy could tell Bud to call a timeout or to make a move, at the end of the game.
I think they were just all panicked, bro. I think they were all shell-shocked and panicked. I think that they just were like, oh, shit, and no excuse whatsoever. I totally hear you. Your assistant, your head assistant is generally not the guy. Your head assistant's generally drawing up plays, making sure your rotations are right. It's the second, third, fourth, or even the guy behind the bench that's like, hey, we've got one left.
Yeah.
Hey, this guy's got 5 fouls. We might want to sub him out. This guy's got 4. Hey, the opposition best player's got 4 fouls. Let's run pick and roll. That's the second, third, fourth assistants. And there is a plethora of those sitting behind the benches and down the benches of the NBA these days.
You can't sit. Like the courtside seats now are in the 8th row because there's 7 rows of assistant coaches. Not one of those fucking guys. Yeah, and analytics. Not one guy holding the clipboard could tell him to call a timeout. Also, if there's one assistant coach, if I'm Giannis, and there's one assistant coach who tries to work on anything but free throw shooting in the offseason, I'd have him fired on the spot. That needs to be something because he's not.
Well, you said they tweaked it. You said they tweaked it in Greece, right? In the off season, you heard about that. And
yeah, they did, and he did well.
Yeah.
He did well, but Bogues, it's not like he's Shaq. It's not like he's shooting a golf ball like Shaq did, and there's nothing Shaq could have really done. This guy, we've seen it. He won a championship doing it, where he finally got a rhythm and he made free throws. But forget the 3. The 3 for him is almost irrelevant. Doesn't matter.
Yeah, I agree.
Because he goes there 12 times a game. If you go there 3 times a game, it doesn't matter if you make free throws or not. But when you go 23 is an anomaly, but you go 12 times, 13 times a game, and you're coming back with, when you're coming back shooting friggin', well, he shot 64, but he needs to be at 75. I mean, he needs to just lock himself in the gym and get it done from the free throw line.
Agreed. And just finally, Supermax looming in the next couple of years. So it will be interesting to see what path Giannis takes. Probably get more into that in the future, but whether he's that one team player, which is very rare these days. That'll be the interesting one to watch with that as well. But his Supermax is up in a couple of seasons. All right, New York, Cleveland. This was an ugly series, the best of times. Very grindy, very low scoring. Did not see this going 4-1. I think I had New York picked 4-3 in this one. Definitely thought Cleveland would have more fight, but they look shell-shocked throughout this series. They just look like, I don't know if you caught much of this series. I caught a little bit of it, and they just, I don't know what the hell they were running offensively, but it literally felt like they would dribble the ball up and try to run whatever their primary set was. They get taken out of it and they just throw it to Donovan or someone else to get an ISO shot. And they had stretches of doing that. Game 1, they only score 97. Game 2, they have a better game. They score 107. They don't get over 100 for the rest of the series, bro. They get 79 in Game 3, 93 in Game 4, 95 in Game 5. They just couldn't score the ball. And you can talk about New York's defense, which is great, but you look at probably, Josh Hart and Robinson, probably their 2 best defenders in the starting lineup. They don't have defenders on that team that you're like, oh shit, that guy's a complete stopper. They got good team defense. Thibs is very good with the way he meticulously scouts teams and breaks things down, but they just couldn't score the ball, man. And it was blatant. Donovan Mitchell 23, 5 and 7 on bad clips. Brunson 24, 4 and 4 for the Knicks. The Knicks were more well balanced. They look more together. Cleveland are a team for the future. So as far as, panic or patience, I'd still be on the patience side of things. I think do they deserve to be a 4 seed? Who knows? Debatable. They got there though, but they weren't a scary 4 seed in my opinion. And I think that they have a good core group. They have a lot of length and athleticism, but they still need some work, and they need to find something that's not isolation offense in my opinion. And Donovan's, he likes the ball in his hands. He likes to be that guy, but then they've obviously got other guards on that team. Who's the other 2 guard? That name is escaping me, pro.
Yeah, Garland.
That's the other one. Who's a similar mold to Mitchell, right? Ball in the hands, likes to get to the bucket, likes to attack. And they have a bunch of role players on 4 and 5. Levert was in the lineup for stretches, and then you got Mobley and Allen, who are not creators offensively, who are role players. So they probably need to shore up something. I like them to look at like maybe a Bogdanovic or someone along those lines to get into that roster, either as a six-man punch or even in the starting lineup, just so they've got a third shooter. You know, Klay Thompson's contract's coming up. Do the Warriors, keep him there on that big max deal? Does he maybe get frustrated if they don't give him the max? Who knows? You know, just someone like that's kind of got that veteran savvy that can get you a bucket, that can shoot the three ball at a clip. They need someone like that on that roster. But congratulations to New York. You know, they've had a lot of turmoil the last 2 decades. They're into the second round. We'll talk about that. It hasn't started off great for them yet, but they're through the second round. But what are you seeing from Cleveland? Are you panic or patience with them?
I'm patient. You know, look, it's the first year they really made a run like this, you know, throughout the season and a decent seed. I think you got to figure out as far as like your personnel. You've got two guys that really isolate, dominating the ball. It's tough. You know, they got two really good bigs too with Allen and Mobley. Like, you know, it's interesting. I just think they need more shooting. They need more, you know, I just think I don't know. I think going forward, you're probably going to have to, I don't know, do you deal Mobley? Do you deal Allen? I don't think so because they're young and they're good for you.
Mobley, definitely not. Mobley's still very young with a ceiling. Allen, you kind of know what you're getting, so maybe you can deal him if you get like for like or something better. But Mobley's a tough one because you just don't know. You don't know his ceiling yet at all. He's still very young and raw.
True. Yeah, Bogues. I'm definitely not panicking. I'm going to run it back with the group, maybe tweak the roster a little bit. Maybe if you can get a little bit better than Osman. Rubio played okay off the bench, whatever. LeVert, did his thing. But if you could, upgrade like the Dean Wades of the world or the Okoros of the world and try to get something better, a little more shooting, like you said, like a Bogdanovic or what have you. They get an interesting group. Like I said, I like Allen. I like Mobley. Obviously Mitchell's a talent. I'm not a huge Garland fan. Very high ISO, tough shots, things like that. But, he shot decent clips at 46 from the field, 41 from the three. So I'm not panicking, Bogues. I'm just going to run it back, try to tweak the roster, go forward. You got a good young coach, that's been around, but sort of young in his head coaching career. I'm just going to run it back and just try to tweak some things.
Agree. We'll get on to the Knicks shortly with the prep for the next round. Philly, Brooklyn, clean sweep for the Philadelphia 76ers. It wasn't I felt like Brooklyn were in a lot of these games, even though it was 4-0. I think they should have probably, I think it was game 3, even game 4, there were stretches where they, turned the ball over late and they just couldn't get it done. And look, I had Brooklyn falling out of even being anywhere near the seed that they got. I thought they'd fall out completely almost to a plane. So if they overachieved with everything they went through, they've got a second-tier star in Bridges, who maybe can play himself into a first-tier star. They've got some good young pieces, but they're going to be making moves for the future. Mikal Bridges had 23, 5, and 4 for the series. Joel Embiid, not MVP numbers for the series, pro. He looked, I think the MVP run for him wore him out, pro. Honestly, there's some people that have noted that. He chases that MVP every season and wears himself out. He was 20, 11, and 4. Not horrible numbers, but not MVP-like numbers that we've seen from Jokic carrying on into the playoffs, right? But Philadelphia had stretches in this series where they didn't look perfect. They didn't look great, but they found a way to figure it out. Embiid missed a game in this series. Maxey was very, very good for him. I thought he was their best player in this series. They win 4-0 pretty easy in that. I don't think we have to get into Philly too much, but Brooklyn, they're an interesting spot because they got some young talent. They got some stars. I don't think they're panic. I also don't think they're patient. I think they got to revamp the roster. There's no doubt about it. They have a lot of veterans on that roster. Aussie Patty Mills, I don't think he hangs around. Seth Curry lost out minutes under the new head coach there that took over. He wasn't playing a whole lot of minutes like he was. Joe Harris, big contract. What do you do with him? Royce O'Neal, Spencer Dinwiddie, Mikal Bridges, Claxton, Finney-Smith, Cam Johnson. So they got some talent. They got some horses, but they got to make some. I think they're in a moderate phase of revamping the roster, pro, meaning 4 or 5 new faces. And moving a bit of the dead weight on, pro. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, you get some good young players on your roster, Bogues. Like, look, you got Bridges, who's a really good, in my opinion, a second option, like a player that could really play off a superstar. But they really did a good job really filling in, not the main option roles in the team, but like, you got Bridges and Cam Johnson and you got Dinwiddie and Claxton. I feel as though they're sort of they put themselves in a great position with Dorian Finney-Smith as well, like guys that you could really build around and go forward with. And look, they've got enough sort of, I think they can go forward and try to acquire that. I think they have enough assets to try to acquire maybe a disgruntled, I wouldn't say superstar, but a player that they could acquire that could be the best player on that team and then go, and try to make a playoff run with. Not right now. It's going to take some time, but they do have some good players. I love Bridges. I like Dinwiddie. I like Johnson. Claxton plays hard. Love Dorian Finney-Smith. Royce O'Neal plays hard. They got to figure out, like you said, Joe Harris. And, it was weird this year was the Seth Curry deal. Bogues, like, he never really got going. I think he was hurt early in the year, and his minutes and production was up and down. But they definitely got to get better, and they definitely got to acquire better players to sort of elevate the team as far as getting that, one great player. So now Bridges, because I think Bridges will get better being that number one option. I just don't think he's going to be some elite player, but he's going to be very good. That's not a knock at all. But I just think that they look, don't panic, run it back, maybe try to tweak some things going forward, draft well. They got a decent draft pick this year in the top 20, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not a huge Cam Thomas fan. He's done okay. He's been inconsistent as a scorer. But look, I think their future, they've really made I think that they made the best out of trade and Durant and sort of making moves there. Look, I think this is our first podcast. We really haven't talked about, about Ben Simmons in a while, but obviously they got to deal with that and Joe Harris and, some decisions to make there. But I think they could add on to the roster. They could do well. I wouldn't panic. I would just go forward with it. Dinwiddie's going to get off the book soon, see what you got to do with him. And then just sort of make some tweaks and just sort of going forward with it. I think their culture is really good. I love the types of players they brought in. And, we'll see what happens going forward.
Agree. We'll see how that all goes. Last one was Boston-Atlanta. Boston 4-2 took the cookies in that one. Not as brutal as I thought they'd be. They kind of let Atlanta kind of stay alive and bob their head for a little bit. I thought they'd be 4-1 max, maybe even a sweep candidate. I mean, they beat them up the first two games and then they lose two straight. They lose 4 and 5 and then wrap it up for game 6. But Tatum 27, 10 and 5, really good series for him. Trae Young 29, 10 and 3. But the Clips is what I want to talk about, Pro. I think he's a guy that's either going to win you a game or lose you a game, in my opinion. And I think the comparisons that people make to Steph Curry are just not fair to Steph Curry, in my opinion. I don't think he's there. I think he's a star, but to compare him to what Steph does, all you need to watch is when Trae gives the ball up, what he does. He stands. He'll stand. He'll kind of walk to a spot. Watch when Steph Curry gives the ball up, what he does. He creates so much spacing for his teammates by cutting and moving and coming off screens and back cutting and curling, and he's obviously in great shape. But Trae Young, decent numbers when you look at it, but then you look at the splits and 40%, just on 40% from the field, 33% from the three, and 10 assists to 4 turnovers isn't great for a point guard. So they live and die by Trae, and we know that. Interested to hear your thoughts on what they do there long term. But Atlanta's kind of they try to build their roster around the Warriors, with Trae Young being Steph and bringing in different guys. Capella was the Looney or the Bogut or the Zaza, and it just hasn't worked. I know they had some personnel go over there from the Warriors and they try to mimic what we did when we were there, but I don't know where this roster can go. We must commend Boston. They got through this series and they ticked the box, and that's what they should have done as the 2 seed. But Atlanta, panic or patience? For me, I'm starting to get into a point of panic. The only reason I'm not full panic is because you've got a new head coach. You got Quinn Snyder there, and I think he's going to change things up. I want to give him a chance to polish this roster and see what he can do with it before I make any changes. If he was not the coach and they were going into an off-season finding a coach, I'd be in full panic mode, and I would really look at moving on from this roster. But does that mean Trae Young's the only safe one and everyone else gone? Maybe. I think DeJounte Murray's been decent for him. It was a good pickup. But with the way Trae plays, I think DeJounte Murray's not as useful because Trae just, the logo threes in transition. He shoots takes a lot of the shots. Now you got two guards that are taking, for this series. Trey took 25 shots a game. Murray took 20. So it doesn't leave a whole lot more for your teammates to get in a rhythm. Collins only attempted 10 shots a night, for instance, pro. But where are you at with Atlanta? You in panic or patience?
Yeah, I'm calling. I'm calling for Trae Young. Yeah, I'm calling around the league and see what I can get. And I'm sure you can get something pretty good. Hey, look, Steph Curry, the comparisons to Steph Curry, every little guard that shoots threes is going to be compared to Steph. Just like any white guy, 6'10" or more, that shoots fadeaways and threes, they all say that he's going to be the next Dirk. And it's easy to say. And that's what's just going to happen. And like I said earlier in the podcast, there's a big difference between putting up numbers and putting up numbers and impacting winning at a high level. And yeah, Steph has been blessed with, really good teammates to play with. We know the laundry list of guys that he's played with that was, that was high level players. But I just don't know where this team can go. They're spending a lot of money. To me, I'd probably deal Young and Collins, even maybe Capella, and just see what I can get. I really like DeAndre Hunter. I think he's a solid player. He's real, he could make shots. He could post up. He could do some things. I'm not in love with Murray, but I sort of like Murray because he could play either guard spot. He's got size. He's got a pretty good basketball IQ. So I do like where you're at with him. Bogdanovich is solid. So yeah, I'm probably going to deal Trae Young. I'm going to see what I can get. Now, look, do you deal? That Clipper deal to get PG. If you do that, then you're not rebuilding. You're just going to put Murray at 1, put PG, at 2-3, Hunter at 2-3, and then just keep going forward from there. But I'm probably going to deal Collins. I'm probably going to deal Young, and I'm going to deal Capella, and just try to roll this back and see either do I get a bunch of picks so I go forward with youth, or do I get other players and just resurrect it that way. But, to me, you're going to get a really good package for Young. You'll get okay players for Collins. You'll probably lose it in the trade value with him. You'll probably get 60, 65 cents on the dollar. And Capella, you'll probably get whatever, protected picks and things. So you're not going to get a lot for Capella. But look, you're 41-41. Yeah, you had a coaching change and all that. And I think, I think their choice for coach is fantastic. I think he does an unbelievable job. But I just think you move on, Bogues, in my opinion. I just think it's time. And I think that you just see where things are. And, so that's where I sort of see the Atlanta Hawks.
Yeah, I agree. It's kind of all over the place with Atlanta, and they've been kind of, besides that one season where they got through Philly, they haven't really had a whole lot of success. So we'll see where Snyder takes them. Moving on to the next round, let's give our predictions real quick. We don't have to get too in-depth with these ones. Golden State Lakers, where you going, pro?
Golden State, which means the Lakers will sweep, but I'm going to go Golden State.
How many games?
I would say 6.
I'm actually thinking most of these playoff series, I think they're all going to go 6-7. So I'm going to go Warriors in 7. I think the Warriors love spending an extra day in LA every now and then, and it'll go 7. All right, Denver, Phoenix. I'm
still going to go Phoenix in 6, but I mean, after they got manhandled by them last night, I'm probably, again, I probably screwed Phoenix by picking them, but that's where I see it. Where do you see it, Bogues?
I'm going Denver. I had them even before the series started, not just because it's 1-0 now, but I feel like they move the ball better. I think they've got enough defenders on that squad to at least try to, stay in front of at least one of the two of Booker or Durant. Now, do they have the size to go after Durant as much? Probably not, but I think KCP on Booker's a good matchup. Brown Jr. is okay on Booker at times. CP's moved off the ball now, and I think Phoenix's offense they can afford to do this, but it grinds to straight ISO ball a lot of possessions, and you got that luxury with the Kevin Durant, right? Whereas I think Denver it's going to be interesting to see if Phoenix can slow down Denver's flow and ball movement. They didn't do that in Game 1. Phoenix have not been great post that trade defensively, pro. They've been, not good, not locked in for stretches. They'll have phases where they, they'll just give up easy looks. There are phases where Aiden's just not checked in. So that's why I'm going with Denver. I think they've got a chance to steal this, and I want to see them do well. I want to see them go as deep as they possibly can this season, and I think they've got the roster to do it. Boston, Philly, who are you with?
I'm going to go with Boston on this. I'm going to go, especially with Embiid being doubtful for game one. I think that knee's pretty messed up, with the sprain. I just don't think that. I think it's going to really impact him, and which would really impact that team, because Harden really hasn't been the player has been in the past in some ways. And I think that without Embiid, it's going to be really an uphill battle for Philly, in my opinion. So I think Boston wins this 4-1. No, 4-2. 4-2. We'll go 6.
Yeah, I'm going to go 4-2 as well on this one. I think Boston as well. I think, like I said, I think Embiid's pushed all the chips to the table with the MVP. Bit of fatigue's going to set in. He's a little bit hurt. Also, Pro, got James Harden in Vegas. Did you see that?
Yeah, I did. Somebody told me that. Sent that to me.
What are you doing? Yeah, we hate gossipy stuff. A player should be allowed to do what they want. But in the middle of the playoffs, you're in the next round against your season-defining playoff series against a very good team, and you go to Vegas on a private jet and go and party for a day or two. It's just bonkers. But look, for context, people, this has been James Harden. This is his routine. When he was in Houston, team goes on a 5-game road trip out wherever, out west, out east. He would leave in the middle of those road trips to go to Vegas for a night on a PJ, and then just private jet it back the next morning to make shoot around a practice. This isn't new to him, and it works because he's still balling. But you're just like, dude, you're in the middle of the playoffs. The reason why it came out is because apparently, allegedly, he slapped someone and blah, blah, blah. So I assume a lawsuit's coming eventually. But it's just like, man, what are you doing? That concerns me with the focus of arguably probably the biggest playoff series of Embiid's career, I think, to make or break. You're MVP candidate. You're probably going to win it. You're up there to win it. But can you get this team to the promised land? And the Harden thing I just thought was just such bad timing for them when they're trying to focus. So, I'll go Boston, Philly on that one. Pro, next one, New York, Miami. So Miami currently up 1-0. Have taken home court essentially by winning that game.
Yeah, I'm going to go Miami. I'll go Miami in 6. Miami in 6.
Okay, I'm going to go into the Knicks in 7. I know
nice.
My friend that listens to this pod is going to kill me because he's a Heat fan, but I think in Thibs I trust. And I just feel like Miami, are they going to burn out? I'm waiting for it. I'm waiting for the burnout. They're not playing, their starters are playing big minutes. They are going a little bit deeper, but then, like you said, they have to play Duncan Robinson. They've got to play a few of these other bench guys. I wonder if Hero can make it back for this toward the end of this series. We'll see. But I'm going to go based on health and burnout. I think that Miami are just riding such a momentum wave. They could possibly carry them to the next round, but I'm going to pick New York based on that. All right, that's our picks. Real quick, Banchero, Rookie of the Year. We got that one right. Markkanen, Most Improved Player. We got that one right. One we didn't get right, Pro. Did you see who was voted the most overrated player in the NBA? By players, of course, via The Athletic.
No, I didn't.
Who would you guess?
Most overrated player. They didn't shed some negative light to to Kawhi because of the injury, did they?
No Kawhi. No, not Kawhi.
But he got both.
I mean, I would have thought most people said Rudy, but Rudy was up there. But the most overrated player as polled by The Athletic, so who knows how many people they polled, but it was Trae Young, interestingly enough.
Interesting.
I found that very interesting, yes, most overrated player. But that's the awards cap. Bit of news real quick, and then we'll move on to a bit more Australian stuff. Stephen A. Smith, his comments basically came out and said the Clippers should force Kawhi to retire. This guy's an absolute piece of work. Based on his injuries and failure, and he's the only star, blah, blah, blah. Pretty harsh. He got a lot of pushback from JJ Redick, and rightfully so. JJ made some examples about this isn't a case of Kawhi being lazy or not working on his body. JJ cited that he worked out with him a few times in the off-season, and the guy's an animal in the gym and diligent and in there twice a day. He's got a degenerative knee, bro, and he's had his injuries, and this is going to continue to be an issue for him for the rest of his career. I've had teammates who've had similar things, and when that clock starts ticking on something degenerative, it's very hard to bounce back from. We saw it with Amari. We've seen it with other guys, Anthony Hardaway. It sucks, but I think very harsh for Stephen A. considering, it's not like Kawhi's a star that's taken all this money and won nothing. The guy's won a few championships, brought the first one ever to Toronto against us, unfortunately, and I think that was very harsh. And I know Stephen A is a shock jock and needs to do this kind of stuff, but that was over the top, in my opinion, and very disrespectful to Kawhi Leonard.
Dude, it's sort of like watching Fox News or CNN, right? Like, they know what buttons to push. And that's all it is. So I didn't really get all upset about it because I know that that's what he does for a living. He takes, and sometimes he'll speak his truth about something, but mostly he'll take a take that's going to get a huge pushback. And that's what he does. He's a professional at it. So when he says stuff like that.
Professional antagonist, yeah.
No doubt. So that's why I don't get all that worked up about it. Look, obviously it's completely false. I mean, it's definitely frustrating with having, to take so much out of your franchise to be able to get him and PG and not have success, and he's sitting out a lot. But what are you going to do? The guy's hurt. You have to hire his friends on your staff. You had to do a lot for Kawhi, for sure. We've read all about it. But to ask him to retire, I mean, come on. Like, the guy, it's so hard to come back from injury, and you've had to go through it, in stages in your career. And I've seen countless players and talk to them about doing it, and just get setback after setback after setback. In some ways, you say, like, you feel bad for the poor bastard. You're like, maybe you should just retire, like, just so you doesn't have to put yourself through it. But forcing the guy to retire, I mean, come on, it's so sort of senseless, right? Because when the guy's healthy, the guy's ridiculous. He doesn't get in trouble. He's high maintenance, but he's not high maintenance where it's like always getting in fights, bad teammate, blah, blah, blah. It's just the guy can't stay healthy, and you've tried every type of thing to keep the guy healthy. But again, that's what Stephen A does. He antagonizes people. He throws out crazy takes just to get a reaction out of people. And hook, line, and sinker, it works 99.9% of the time. The guy is unbelievable at it. So, yeah, I didn't really think much of it. I just sort of like another thing. And then JJ dressed him down a little bit about, the comment and things like that. And, yeah, it's just Stephen A being Stephen A, though. Like I said, it's like any other network that's really try to push the buttons of the people who watch the show to get a reaction, to get popularity, to get whatever it is. The guy makes, $12 million a year. He's earning every penny of it. So what are you going to do?
Very balanced take, bro. I agree to an extent. But I just hate when players' names are thrown through the mud.
No doubt.
At the expense of shock jocking,
Yeah.
Kawhi doesn't have a chance to retort. Kawhi doesn't have a chance to say, well, hang on a second, can I have a rebuttal to that? And I think some of that stuff's a bit too much, but you're 100% right. It's all for clicks and eyeballs, and we're talking about it, so the mission accomplished. Moving on from that, one final one. I've got a rumor mill from an insider of mine in the NBA. Your Boston Celtics pro. Apparently Jaylen Brown wants out in the next season or two. Mm-hmm. Whether he leaves on his own accord. I know he's contracted for the next 2 seasons, but wants to be the guy on his own team. What's rumored is that team is, do you know who that is? That he wants to go to?
Is he with, did you mention another player he's with or no?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So apparently Houston Rockets, Jaylen Brown, Ime Udoka wants to go there and be the number one option, along with James Harden. That's the scuttlebutt that's being around the traps, not from the media, but just from some people within the NBA. Those two are trying to get to Houston. Harden wants to get back there eventually, and Jaylen Brown wants to be there to be the number one option. So that's one to watch. The other one is Miami throwing the absolute house at Dame Lillard is the other one. And I think that's a perfect get for Miami. If they could do that with Jimmy. Jimmy's the grit, grind scorer, not always pretty, with a now legitimate scorer in Dame. If you have to lose maybe a Bam or something, I would do it, because I think those two guys together and playing the guard spots would be tough. And Dame is a culture guy. I mean, the guy hasn't complained really about living in Portland. And have you been in Portland lately? Like, there's a reason
No, fuck
why the
that.
suicide rate is up there. No offense to people there, but it rains every single day, and it's not the most inspiring place when the sun doesn't come out. And I believe the suicide stats still will back that up to this day, or maybe it's moved to the top 5. But I love you, Portland people. Don't be too mad at me. But I would do it just based on that. That's a star that is perfect for that Miami Heat organization and ethos and the way they go about things. And you're going from Portland to Miami. I'm sure Dame would welcome that. So that's another one to watch, Pro. Be interesting to see what happens in the offseason there if they can pull that off.
Yeah, I've heard the Harden thing for sure. I definitely think that. I think that Boston will keep him under contract as much as possible. Plus, they win, especially if they make the finals or what have you this year. I think that's going to be tough. But I definitely heard the Harden to Houston deal, and then Miami. Look, you've got the assets to do it. That's the thing. It's not salary cap because obviously you're going to have to make a move for him. So I think either
Hero and throwing player plus a pick could get it done.
Bunch of picks, Hero, and probably Robinson's contract will get it done. And I say he's either going to go there or Philly for Maxey if they do lose Harden and they don't win it, just to put him with another superstar. That Daryl Morey puts his hat in the ring for every superstar every year he tries to get. So, but the Miami thing's interesting because you could throw Hero, and for Portland, you want that young player because you're going to be rebuilding. So you just don't want picks. You want to get a young player and picks. I think Hero and Maxey are sort of in the same boat, but I would think that Miami would really cover Dame. I think it's their type of player. You put him with Jimmy and you put him with Bam, and then those role players. I think it's a perfect mix. Why wouldn't you put your hat in the ring for him? So I definitely think that that's a deal.
I agree with that. That's some of the scuttlebutt coming from the US. Moving on, we're going to go through Banter, the social betting experience, where you can jump into the Banter channels, connect with the Dabble community and ride a bet together. Follow, copy bets, and jump into Banter. Download the app, have a dabble socially, gamble responsibly. So some Australian international news, Pro. Shannon Scott, the import for the Cairns Taipans, has signed with the Brisbane Bullets. I think it's a good pickup for the Bullets. Really, really good pickup. Just a solid veteran import that knows how to play the game. I thought he was pretty decent. Not a high-scoring, high flyer, but just a solid, good import. So I like that from the Bullets. Did you see the fight over there in Europe, Pro?
I did.
Oh, my goodness. So for those who haven't seen it, it's a EuroLeague game between Real Madrid and Partizan in Real Madrid. And, man, Dante Exum, you got to feel bad for him because he's in the scuffle and he gets picked up by, what was his name?
Ubaselli.
Ubaselli from France, a French national, picks him up from behind kind of in a half chokehold and just 180 body slams him. Apparently in that he has done a ligament in his ankle. Dante Exum has now,
toe.
I know it's toe. The middle of toe. Yeah. I know it's the middle of the playoffs. So sometimes you think, is he walking out of the arena on crutches to send a message to the EuroLeague to suspend this guy? You never know with this stuff. But from what I'm hearing is he's going to be out for a while. And that's horrible for Dante Exum. He's had a hell of a career year over there in Europe. So much so as I think he would have got a nice little NBA deal to come back over to the US. The one concern for him was injuries. And now he gets an injury in a brawl, which is just absolutely horrendous. You hate to see it. But, man, that was tough to watch, Pro.
Yeah, it's never good, man. These brawls, why? What are you going to fight for, seriously? Why? Because a guy said something or whatever, and then someone gets hurt. Poor prick wasn't even in the thing, and he gets body slammed.
It was the end of the game. It was the end of the game, and there was the import point guard, and I think Sergio Lula, just gave him a little cheap shot, kind of shoulder as he drove by him. The guy from Partizan then reacted to that, and then it caused an all-in. So you could argue that the import from Partizan should have just let it go and said, there's a minute and a half left. But it's an emotional game. No one wants to get us, over amount of physicality for no reason. But yeah, you're right. This is now could cost a team a series, could cost a team the next series. But what the kicker is, Pro, is The next game's in Serbia on Wednesday, the 3rd of May. So in 2 days, European time, Real Madrid has to go to Partizan. And I'll tell you this, they're going to need I'm not using this loosely or tongue-in-cheek. There's going to need to be not a police escort. The army's going to have to get involved because the fans over there, especially in Serbia, being of Croatian descent, I know, Partizan, Red Star fans, no joke. Absolutely no joke. They often have riot police at their games. I really fear for Real Madrid's safety getting to and from those games. And that's going to be an unbelievable electric environment in the arena, but you just hope these players are safe because there's going to be some crazy people doing some crazy things, knowing that, you know, Dante was their number one hope of perhaps winning a EuroLeague championship. But watch that space, bro. So Wednesday, you probably have it at a nice time, your time in the US, but Australian time, I think it's, 4:30 a.m. So I definitely won't be getting up for that one, but I'll try to find where I can watch a replay and just see how many coins are thrown onto the court. Real Madrid players. They might be the first game we see in the opposing team has to wear helmets in a basketball game for this game. But that sucked. Real quick, the pools for the World Cup have been announced, pro. So we'll go through these real quick. Group A: Angola, Dominican Republic, Philippines, Italy. So games are, of course, in the Philippines, pro. So they've given them just such a tough pool, pro, with Angola, Dominican Republic, and Italy. Group B: South Sudan, Serbia, China, Puerto Rico. Group C: USA, Jordan, Greece, New Zealand. That sucks for New Zealand. It's a pretty tough pool for them. Egypt, Mexico, Montenegro, Lithuania round out Group D. That's actually a decent one as well. Group E: this is Australia's group: Germany, Finland, Australia, Japan. Now, I think that's a pretty tough group, pro. I think this is all depending on whether all the players play. Schroeder plays for Germany and Markkanen and for Finland. So it's going to be interesting to see if they all suit up. And even Japan with Hachimura aren't going to be easy beats. I think they beat Australia. It was a qualifier game, but a few years ago. So, but we will have our full squad there, and I'm looking forward to that. They should get out of that group, but it's not as easy as people think. Group F: Slovenia, Cape Verde, Georgia, Venezuela. Group G: Iran, Spain, Ivory Coast, Brazil. And Group H: Canada, Latvia, Lebanon, France. Canada have a chance in this one as well if they get their whole squad there, Wiggins and whatnot, and they all play. So that rounds out the World Cup, pro. That's coming up in August, September of this year, so I'm looking forward to that one. Really quickly, we'll just touch on the WNBL. Bit of issues there in the Women's National Basketball League over here, pro, with a potential, I wouldn't say a lockout, but there's some issues with the CBA and the Players Association and the league. I'll read these quotes, which is quoted from the Herald Sun, and journalist Mick Randall had posted this, but basically a war has broken out between the NBL. So, pro, just for context, the WNBL is owned by Basketball Australia, the federation, whereas the NBL is owned by Larry Kesselman, so big difference. What looms to be a flashpoint in WNBL's 43-year history, the majority of the 8 club owners who bled almost $5 million last season have united in a bid to force Basketball Australia to relinquish control of the struggling league. Stalemate has left more than 50 uncontracted players in limbo after free agency, which was due to begin on April 10. Has not begun. It's been postponed. There's some figures that have been leaked to the media. 8 clubs combined lost almost $5 million in the 22-23 season. Total expenditure exceeded $12 million against revenue of just $7 million. The figures show BA's loss on its near $2.7 million investment amounted to about $530,000. This was despite the league touting the highest regular season attendance in the competition's history of over 125,000 people, club membership jumping 70%, and an estimated audience reach of in excess of 120 million, pro. So a lot going on there. There is some pressure for Basketball Australia to go the route of selling to a private businessman. Larry has put his hand up. I know Larry would love to own the WNBL next to the NBL. From what I hear is it's non-negotiable. I don't think Basketball Australia will give up control of the WNBL. That's just my mail. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. But there are some people strategizing to have it moved on to a private equity, pro. So you hate to see this, mainly for the female athletes, who, world-class female athletes come and play in the WNBL. They're just stuck in limbo now. What do? Do I go sign overseas? Do I wait? Is my contract still good? And I've been through one lockout, obviously different scale when we're dealing with the money we're dealing with, and I was in a good financial position when it all came up. But you hate to be in these situations, pro, where leagues go down these routes because it never really ends amicably for either side. And then, the more time goes on, only negatives can happen, pro. So hopefully that gets wrapped up sooner rather than later.
Bogues, do they feel as though that Basketball Australia is mismanaging the league? Is that why they want
to an extent? Yeah, to an extent, there's that. There's also a proponent where the athletes themselves would like a pay increase.
Yeah, of course.
And I think BA negotiating with the Players Association, the owners are like, hang on a second, like, we'd love to do a pay increase, but we're losing money.
Exactly.
So that's where it's become kind of murky, and you hate for these things to be leaked. This has been going on since April 10. It only got leaked recently, and now it's gone to the media. No one wins. The game suffers. The athletes in question suffer. The owners suffer. So hopefully this gets sorted, but it's not as easy as can be because Basketball Australia is a government-funded entity as well. So they have accounts that they need to take into account. They're ordered by the government, whatnot. They need to make sure they're spending right. So watch this space. It's ongoing as we speak, and we hope that they can they can get bums on seats in the next season and continue to have a prosperous league. But you never want to read about these kind of things. I hope cooler heads prevail with that one, pro. And just finally, Cole Anderson, pro. He's going to suit up for Team China at
How
this
does that
World
work?
Cup. Well, I think he just puts a jersey on and goes out and plays, essentially. I think he has descent. I think through his mother, I believe it was, I read. Yeah, there's some descent there through his mother. So the slow-mo, you better have a slow-mo offense for Kyle, Team China. None of this high-pace shit. But I found that one interesting. So they found a bloodline there, and I don't think he's suited up for Team USA, I don't believe. So I think he's eligible to do it. So that's interesting. And just finally in Australia, pro, here's another thing I found out about junior basketball here, which just is doing my head in. And I understand why it was probably thought to be a good rule, but you cannot play zone. You guys have that over there as well in high school, or
Fuck no. They should. They should make these kids play man to man, maybe like 1 quarter zone, but no, there's no rule.
See, I disagree, pro. I disagree because this is the problem that we're facing. Look, I get why you want to emphasize kids to be able to guard their man or their woman if they're playing. I get all that. The problem is, what's the cutoff point? So far in Australia, I think it's under 14s and below, you can't play zone. So then what happens? These kids get to under 16s and they're like, what the hell is this shit? What is a zone? Yeah. I've never dealt with it. So it's that question of like, do you build a resiliency? Do you give them you still got to learn zone because you're going to play it. But this is the kicker, pro. Get this. So if you're playing a zone in 14s and under or 12s and under, you've got part-time referees and not a knock to them because they're not doing training every day to be a referee for junior sport.
Right.
You get a technical foul if you're caught playing a zone, right?
Right. The
problem is a lot of officials can't differentiate help defense from a zone.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So what they're doing is they're now teaching kids for the split line, don't go past the ball side, the weak side block. You can't go past the block because if you start straight on the split line, they think you're in a zone, they're calling you for a technical foul. So this is my point. On something that was probably deemed a pretty good idea at the time, it has a domino effect on other parts of the game. And now, because I was teaching some kids this last week and the coach goes, hey, you can't get him to go to the split line. I'm like, what do you mean? This is like the number one thing for those that aren't familiar with a split line is if the ball's on the opposite wing and your man's on the other wing, you get to basically under the basket is the split line. You're a help defender. That's like the number one thing we teach, pro, as you would know, is team defense at a young age is get to the split line. They're like, no, you can't do that because they're going to get technical foul. Like, what? What do you mean they're going to get technical? Oh, because I think it's a zone. And a lot of the referees can't tell whether it's a zone or just good help defense. And I'm like, you have to be shitting me. So I thought I'd put it on there, just an example from, over legislating things can sometimes have a negative effect. And at the end of the day, they're jumping from 14s to 16s. Then all of a sudden it's full throttle zone as much as you want. And these kids' heads are spinning. They're like, where do I go? What do I do? Wait, I'm screening the guy on the zone, but then they switch. So your point was probably right naturally when you first heard this comment, pro, and you said, that's great. But now you go the other way. You're like, shit, like there is detrimental effects. So just something I thought I'd flag with the listeners and junior coaches out there. I know a lot of people have spoken about it, and it is a little frustrating.
Yeah, I think that look, everybody has their way of, like, if they were God, they get to make the call how you would do it. What I would do is I would put 1/4 a zone in all youth basketball, like the younger grades especially. If you want to play zone, play at least a quarter or a half of it. I'm not for kids just sitting in zones the whole time, but I think you should be able to learn both. But obviously, people do it different. I do agree with you though that you don't want them to be in a situation where, like, all of a sudden, like, boom, you play in zone. Yeah, I think that's a little bit, that it's a shell shock for sure. And now you're just sort of behind the eight ball with it. But it's interesting. I think most of the guys in the United States, or girls or whatever, coaching, I think it's laziness just to teach zone to all these kids young, and they don't play any man-to-man at all. I think there definitely needs to be an influx of both. But what am I? Who am I to say? So, yeah, it's an interesting point, though.
I think it's a balance. I think you want to have a balance, and I think most coaches out there need to realize that you don't give kids a steady diet of anything. You want them to learn the game, but then the competitive comes into even junior coaches. They want to win. So, I'll just go to a zone. They can't score and we'll win. Ha, ha, ha. I'm the greatest under 12s,
yeah,
7th region suburb coach of all time, right? And that's where we get lost on things. But the detrimental effect of that is now you got kids not wanting to, they don't go to help defense. They're like, I'm telling them to get to split line. They're like looking at me like I'm an alien. Like, what do you mean? I can't do that. I'm going to get in trouble. I'm like, what the hell? So just one of those things when you sometimes over legislate things generally for the greater good, you think it's doing the right thing. And it has it kind of backfires. So just something of note. All right, stats real quick, and then we'll get a few stats and a fact or fake news, and we'll get out of here. Stephen Curry, highest ever Game 7 scoring performance was today, pro, with 50 points. The leader before that was Kevin Durant in that loss to Milwaukee in that Game 7. But Curry with 50 today has broken the record for all-time Game 7 scoring performances. Useful, useless?
That's useful, man. I just think that what he did today was ridiculously legendary. Like, guy scores 50 Game 7, which they really needed, and it's tough to win in someone else's building in a Game 7. I think it's definitely useful. What do you say, bud?
100% useful. Yeah, I mean, he's killer, and just the performance that he had. They had a lot of empty possessions. Looney obviously getting all those O boards and kicking them out, but he just does that phase in the third, fourth quarter where he's hitting the 1 foot runners and just would not let them die, and would not let Sacramento come back within striking distance. And then, with 7-8 minutes left, it was a 15-point game. They just couldn't reel it back. So all-time performance, one of the all-time greats, useful as can get. All right, the Warriors have won at least one road game in a series, 28 straight series as pro. Useful, useless?
It's pretty useful, man. I mean, it's 28 series in a row. They take a road game. That's pretty damn good. Like 1 year.
That's amazing, especially considering they had many years where they were the number one seed, so they didn't even have to rely on getting an away game, right? Just hold home court, you win the series.
Yeah.
So yeah,
that's a hell of a deal. I would say definitely useful.
Yeah, I'll go useful as well on that one. And last one, we'll bring in good old Phil Jackson. Oh, sorry, second last one, or I'll save that one to last. All right, the Beam team this season, the Sacramento Kings, highest offensive rating of all time. I know Pro loves that offensive rating. Highest of all time. First playoff appearance since 2006. First clutch player of the year. First rookie with 200-plus three-pointers. Most points by a team since 1984. And the coach of the year, Pro. Was it a useful or useless season for the Sacramento Kings, Pro?
Useful. I mean, it's a useful. Their season, useful. Like I said, they weren't there before, and they needed to see what this felt like and blowing a series. And they blew it. Don't get me wrong. But I definitely think there's a lot of learning points for them because they needed the experience. But that's a lot of stuff to have. It's a lot of hardware coming back to your team, for sure. But except the highest offensive rating of all time. I think that's full of shit. I think because someone else is going to be the highest by summer league, there'll be another team at the highest of all time. So I don't really like that offensive rating of all time deal, but they have a lot of hardware coming back to them. But yeah, I think it's useful. Useless for you?
Useful. Yep, I think it's useful. No, useful. They had a good year. They had a useful year. I think that, some of these awards are like the first clutch player of the year. Yeah. Great. But yeah, I mean, some of this stuff, their offense was really good. Coach of the year, I think it was a great year for them and a great positive stepping stone for hopefully what's a second, third round berth next season, the season after. All right, last one. Phil Jackson Phil Jackson never lost 3 games in a row from 91 to 2002, pro. Useful or useless?
Pretty useful. It's useful, the fact that he had 3 Hall of Famers with him almost in every one of those years except like 2. But it is useful. I mean, imagine, how you see even with you see it with Kerr and Pop, when they have great teams, they win. When they don't, they don't. And, Jackson didn't always have great teams in that stretch. He had teams that, especially without Jordan when he retired and, still navigating his team through that, not to lose 3 games in a row, not to, even with those guys, you've seen it, teams sometimes get bored and they get in a funk and they lose 3, 4, 5 in a row. It doesn't happen a lot with great teams, but it happens. And for them not to be able to do that, a lot of it had to do with the talent that he had, but some of it obviously has to do with him after a loss or 2 losses in a row, getting those guys together, getting those guys ready to compete, and just sort of being a positive influence on that, on that winning. So I would definitely say that's useful.
Yeah, I'll go useful as well. I mean, that's an impressive stat. We know the Bulls era, and then even the Lakers to not lose 3 games in a row. I mean, that's very, very impressive. So useful. What do you got? You got anything for us this week? Fact or fake news?
My witness protection person in Australia has, again, I'm saying I want to know fact or fake news. Did you or did you not get teed up in a game in the last 2 weeks coaching your team?
Oh, sure did.
They said you handled it well, though. They said you handled it. You didn't overreact to it. You talked to the referee. You were a gentleman about it.
I should have.
Yeah.
No, I should have. I should have overreacted because I got teed up for asking him. I didn't swear. You know when you get a tee and you're like, what the
fuck did I say?
I'd rather have just cussed him out and got kicked out. Like, that was the tee that I got. I was like, are you serious? Like, all I said was, hey, my big fella's getting hit out there, man. And he's like, that's your warning. And I was like, wait, you give me a warning for that? And then he teed me up. And I was like, bro, are you serious?
Amazing.
Like, I'm talking to you nicely. I'm not swearing at you. I'm not being belligerent. I'm asking nicely. Like, my big fella's getting hit out there. Call the foul on him. Like, and then, because I've got a big fella on the team that's bigger than everyone. And then as soon as he swings a small elbow or pushes, like, it's a foul, right? So I'm like, just call it the other end. Like, he's a bigger kid. He's getting hacked. And warning, and then teed me like literally 5 seconds later. And I was like, what? So we're not after the game. And I'm like, dude, like, I wasn't swearing at you. I wasn't being disparaging. I was just asking you to look after my big guy. And then you give me a warning saying I've been doing it all game. Well, you hadn't told me I was doing it all game. You know what I mean? Which I wasn't. But yeah, it really pissed me off. I got home and I was like, I wish I would have just cussed him out and just got thrown out, because it would have been, you want to get your money's worth. But I'm like, nah, you got to be a good mentor to these kids and not fly off the radar. The kids are laughing their asses off. They told everyone in the world get to practice on Tuesday, and everyone.
I bet that ref was like at Johnny Pickles 2123, the guy that you probably cussed out on Twitter about a month ago.
Chance, very high chance.
Yeah, so
very high chance. But yeah, look, I mean, the officials do their best. They need a little bit of prodding every now and then. There's a lot of missed travels and missed fouls, but I just get frustrated when the big kid gets called for ticky-tacky fouls because he's so big and strong, and then literally, like, he posts up with like 2 kids hanging on his arm like they're monkey bars, and they're like, oh no, play through that. And you're like, are you serious? Like, that's why I got a little bit frustrated. I could see a little bit of myself in this instant from junior basketball, awesome. So I had to. But yeah, the tech was soft, man. I was pretty pissed. I'm going to find out who that mole is too, by the way.
I got to protect him to the end. Fuck that is. I got to protect him to the end. And the sound guy hit me up on email. I just found it. It was in my spam, so I owe the sound guy an email back. So I just found that out about 10 minutes before we went on air. So the sound guy, he enjoyed. I think he enjoyed his 10 seconds of fame. So I'm the only guy promoting him. So he liked the fact that, but I think he's getting a little cocky because I think he asked for a segment, like the sound guy segment. So I think he's got to be fucking held in check. Although,
we're going to really back
after
in.
saying that, he's probably going to have me sound more ridiculous than I already sound with my lisping and, playing with the fucking dials, in the post-production work from this week.
Yeah, we can just withhold some paychecks. It'll get fixed immediately, bro. Don't worry.
Thank you. Appreciate it, both.
All right. We'll see you next week. Thanks.
Yep. Thanks, guys.
Andrew Bogut.
Let's get rogue.